Hello, my name is Bogdan Nazare, and this is my project, Plagiarism Practical Considerations in 2023. I opted to mostly focus on what would a student want to know in practice regarding plagiarism if he wanted to write a paper, and also pay the specific attention to what language models are doing now in the world of research and how plagiarism how the topic of plagiarism is explored with the content generated by those AIs. I will talk about the types of plagiarism, examples, how plagiarism is detected, how it is assessed, uh, talk a bit about ChatGPT and trends, and how to avoid plagiarism, some tips and tricks, and finally conclusions. So, first of all, what is plagiarism? It's defined as many things: to steal or pass off someone else's words as your own, to use someone else's production without crediting the source, and to present ideas that were derived from an existing source, but to lie and say that they were yours or pass them off as new and original. This applies to all forms of media and created content, including text, images, videos, and music. Types of plagiarism. There is verbatim plagiarism, the worst kind maybe, which is word for word copy pasting. If one would need to do that, they need to put those in quotation marks and have them be accompanied by references to the original source. Many people also do cutting and pasting from the internet randomly without clear acknowledgement. These sources should also be referenced and also be more closely evaluated, as they might not have undergone peer review and might not be verified or always correct. Inaccurate citation is when you either don't if you don't provide if you do provide the citation, there might still be problems with it. It might be incomplete, as in it cannot be the source cannot be easily found using the information provided. The citation may be unreachable, in which case the author needs to present a secondary work based on that work that he needs to reference. Fake or incorrect citation, it just doesn't exist or it points to the wrong document, or problems with too many citations in order to fill up your bibliography, even though you didn't consult them. Paraphrasing, this is when you alter a few words and change their order, but maintain basically the same argument and don't cite. This is still identified as plagiarism and should be referenced if you refer to materials directly. You should also cite material derived from lectures that you heard or attended, other forms of education, and it's recommended in general to summarize the cited point instead of paraphrasing to avoid using quotation marks. Collusion is another type of plagiarism. It's when there is a secret or unauthorized collaboration between students, for example, between student teams. They talk with each other and share information even though they weren't allowed to. Failure to acknowledge assistance. For example, when you have help for a project or a paper, but you don't reference the name of the person that assisted you. The only exemption is when the help is from the official tutor or supervisor that's already referenced for the project. But if there is significant guidance that leads to a substantive change in the content, that needs to be acknowledged. Contract cheating, this is also very common when you just pay someone to complete the assignment for you or complete someone else's work as your own. This is kind of what you're doing with ChatGPT as well, more on that later. And auto plagiarism is submitting a work for an assessment that you have already submitted, either partially or fully. And for example, it's when you submit the same paper or report for two different courses or research assignments, either within the same or different universities, instead of doing other new work once again. This also applies to copying your own work and not citing yourself. It's easier to get an idea what plagiarism is by looking at examples. From Turnitin, these are 10 most common examples of plagiarism. There's clone, where you just submit someone's work word for word. Control C, when there are large sections of a text present without alterations from a single source. Recycle is similar, but you try to put in synonyms or other words to try and make it more unique, but in practice, much of the text is still the same. Um, rem wait. Remix or patch writing, it's when you use paraphrases from multiple sources made to fit together and not citing them. Hybrid, when you use cited sources combined with uncited sources, which personally I think I used to do a few times myself in the past. Mashup, when you mix copies of material from multiple sources without doing very much extra work. The error, when you include citation to non-existing or inaccurate information, like I said earlier, incorrect citations or incomplete citations. Aggregator, when the whole paper is composed of parts of other papers and it contains almost no original work. And retweet, when you include proper citation, but it's too close to the original wording and structure and doesn't include anything new. What is not plagiarism? As I mentioned earlier, your own work is not plagiarism if it has not been previously published or submitted. Quoting and paraphrasing a section from another source, if you use proper citation, is not plagiarism, up to a limit. We'll talk about that later. Using your own original ideas and concepts that you produced independently, you don't need to cite that. And using commonly accepted knowledge or facts or common knowledge. These don't require citation, but you may not present them as your own original work. Common knowledge is the information that the average educated reader would accept without needing a source to back it up, like well-known facts and ideas, social norms, and cultural concepts. This can depend on the intended audience as well. Some examples of common knowledge, they would be major historical events, common facts about the world, popular phrases or idioms, basic mathematical formulas, or major scientific discoveries or laws, like Newton's laws of motion, the Big Bang, or the expansion of the universe. If you refer to technical terminology or specialized jargon, you usually need to cite that. The same with original ideas and concepts that are unique to very few people or just one author. Information that is known to like a small group of people, like inside secrets or inside information or trade secrets. Very recent developments of science that have not yet entered the public zeitgeist, or somewhat obscure cultural practices of certain peoples. Just a few examples. How plagiarism is detected. So there are many tools out there that are used by both students and universities. The most popular that I could find are Grammarly, Turnitin, Qtext, Copyscape, Smallseo tools, and DupliChecker. These are trained on larger or smaller data sets and are intended either mostly for academia or web writing or both. I should note that most plagiarism checkers most often detect similarity instead of plagiarism directly, like what percentage of your text is similar to other sources on the internet. And the verdict, if it's plagiarism, depends not only on the amount of text paraphrased, but also how the author respected the guidelines surrounded the quotations and citation, and how it used that text to generate new ideas. Some words about the technical implementation. Current similarity checkers use more abstract representations for words and phrases and sentences and even entire documents. They don't work directly with the strings, as some might imagine. They usually use embeddings and high dimensional space that capture extra information and relations between concepts. And some words about the common detection pipelines. It usually includes text preprocessing, query generation when you turn it into embeddings and you send it to be compared to a database. We search that database and match it for possible source documents. Common techniques used are inverted index, where you certain words and phrases map to various documents and are quick to search, or cosine similarity, where we compare how close different embedding vectors are to each other, and you find the probable closest matches. After you find the potential close matches, you use more precise localization methods to identify and match exact sections that are very similar. This does not entail matching long exact sequence of text between the query and the target document. They tend to look at a deeper level at the meaning of the sentences, and that goes beyond the word-by-word structure or linguistic barriers, as these models are usually trained to understand and work with multiple languages simultaneously. As a small conclusion, these methods such as simple paraphrasing, like changing word or phrase order or using synonyms, as well as translating the document, they are not reliable methods if one wants to avoid plagiarism. Like I also, and probably lots of us tried to do in the past, we shouldn't try it. Don't try it. Assessing plagiarism. I talked earlier about how these detectors use similarity, not just a direct verdict. Many of them generate what's called a similarity report, which assigns a similarity score to your checked document or text. Still recording. They identify sections of the text that are similar to other sources and points out the original sources of those documents, so you can look what to change or rephrase properly. And based on these reports, an educator can look into more details as to what exactly is matching, by how much, and whether the student has used proper citation and referencing guidelines. This 41% match overview, for example, it's very high, but if the paper is using that information very effectively and smartly and communicating some new ideas based on it, it might not actually be plagiarism. So how much similarity is acceptable? We should remember that a small degree of similarity with other text sources is unavoidable. Like some similarity is natural, as this when you're researching a paper, well, a good researcher would need to read and acknowledge the views of other authorities, which is a crucial step towards forming new ideas and original ones. And we shouldn't strive necessarily for 0% similarity. Trying to achieve it might just waste time when working on a paper that is otherwise very sound in the argument it makes, and it makes very good contributions to the scientific community. Most guidelines recommend less than 15%, but this is highly variable based on the institution and the field, some accepting up to 30% in certain cases. It depends on the type of work as well. Generally, one should stay below 5% for literature essays, below 10% for PhDs, or 20% for a master or bachelor's thesis. And some examples of recommendations from various institutions. The Modern Language Association advises for less than 10-15%. The Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers advises less than 20% for conference papers and 30% for journal articles. Elsevier and Springer also advises a similarity of less than 15%, but they note that similarity scores are not sufficient to determine if it constitutes plagiarism, and many academic institutions encourage that you look more critically at these facts. One should also consider intentional versus unintentional plagiarism. Intentional if there was a deliberate attempt to cheat or steal someone's work, or unintentional if it's due to skill deficits on the author's part, such as difficulty in language ability, fluency, or difficulty just understanding and summarizing an idea. And I know I've been there. Both can lead to writing content that follows the source a bit too closely, And also, a poor grasp on quoting and citation guidelines can lead you to accidentally not quote properly and commit plagiarism accidentally. And naturally, this distinction is likely to weigh heavily in the decision of how the author might be penalized if he or she is found to have committed plagiarism. Uh, some words about large language models and plagiarism. There are some worrying trends that we are beginning to see with ChatGPT. They are or other language models. They are increasingly used to generate content for assignments, like all of it, all at once, and just copy pasted. Content is often directly copied without further checking. And this raises the question if AI text generated content is plagiarism. Well, the answer is quite complicated, actually. There are multiple views about it. So one might say no, because it uses concepts it has learned for a huge data set, and it constructs an entirely new argument. This effectively rephrases, summarizes, and adapts existing knowledge, which falls outside of what we technically define as plagiarism. In a way, yes, because it is against the principles of academic integrity, which plagiarism seeks to uphold, and also it kind of resembles just stealing someone else's work, which also falls within the plagiarism definition. It kind of is in the sense that it is in the sense that it fails to credit the authors of the ideas and concepts learned from the papers that it was trained on, and this is plagiarism, even if it's accidental and the person doesn't know that the AI generated someone else's ideas. But it is not plagiarism in the technical sense that it's very, very difficult to detect by current plagiarism detection tools. So even though the tools I mentioned earlier are effective at seeing through easy attempts at paraphrasing or translating a document to avoid plagiarism, the AI chat box actually managed to fool these systems quite consistently, according to recent research. It appears that AI paraphrasing tools, if they are applied on top of generated copy or copied content, are effective in bypassing almost all plagiarism detection, even if it might detect some raw ChatGPT input. And even if some current deep learning models are able to detect AI generated content, obviously they can be easily fooled by content generated by another model that they didn't train on, or another application of paraphrases used on top of that output. This would mean that detection of either AI plagiarism or AI generated content itself is probably not achievable in the long term, so we should be realistic about that. I did a sort of a fun experiment out of curiosity. I wrote a companion report to this one that I generated entirely by using ChatGPT. I provided ChatGPT with the outline of my report and used prompts to generate each section and match the word count, and evaluated both my original report as well as the one generated by ChatGPT. It was evaluated by plagiarism detectors. So I was quite surprised by the results of which one came as original, though soon it won't be very surprising. Plagiarism scan report found my own report to be 7% plagiarized, or maybe summarized. It didn't give details because it was the free version. But the ChatGPT generated one was 0% plagiarized. The same theme, I've seen it in when using Copyscape. When it evaluated my report, it found 27 results of similar text that was matched with other sources, but with the ChatGPT output, no results. It was perfectly clean from a plagiarism standpoint. This obviously raises the question if this is an incentive for bad actors, because it's just easier to use ChatGPT and get away with possibly plagiarizing. So it turns out that it's not exactly free cheating, because there are some important drawbacks of using AI chatbots. as a general advice, one should consult AI chatbots, but verify and not copy paste their output because one of the dangers is inaccuracy. Some may not always produce accurate information, though this wait, yes, they may not produce accurate information, and this comes in various forms. There are factual mistakes, although these are admittedly getting more rare as better models come out. They still output sometimes contradictory information about the subjective views, especially. I've seen this when working on my report. For example, when I asked it to give me examples of common knowledge, it said that the formula for the area of a circle is common knowledge. But then later on, it said it gave me the same example for situations where it is not common knowledge. And first, it argued that it's a very easy formula; everyone should know it. But then it said that everyone knows that a circle is round, but maybe they might not know the formula for it. There might be hallucination, where the entire generated response is fictional, but presented as a fact. A fun little example is given here, where I told it to tell me about the Romanian researcher Bogdan Adrian Nazare, which is me, and how he improved he improved penicillin in the 50s and other contributions in the field, and it's like it generated a Wikipedia report about my great achievements 70 years ago. So be careful of this. Other dangers, lack of citation. Generated content is based on existing text written by humans, but is not normally accompanied by citations, if you present ideas from other people without citation, again, it's plagiarism. And furthermore, if you ask it to give you the source, it can generate fictitious sources for the results. And another example that happened to me, it told me that the American Psychological Association does not provide specific percentages. I verified this information, which was already a bit weirdly framed because it said here before seeking outside help. So I think it mangled their guidelines with the contents of some of their papers. But anyway, it told me that it's in the publication manual, 7th edition, page 253. I looked into it, and there is no mention of those guidelines about plagiarism. So it is, and there was no mention in the entire document as well. So it was just simply a fabricated response. Another danger, poor quality of research. The generated work usually lacks originality and doesn't contribute anything to new research in academia. And there is a poorer educational outcome. The author will not develop a deep understanding and insight on the topic. He will be less able to explain and answer questions regarding the topic and have less ability to build new and innovative ideas on top of a shallow understanding of that subject naturally. It's probable, though, that in the future, the first two issues will be solved with the inaccuracy and the lack of citations. No, there was no third one. Yeah, and after GPT-4 and 5 comes out, and those issues will start to be fixed, there might be more incentive for bad actors to use and abuse this system, which will lead to worse off results in the long term, both for them and in academia, as these two drawbacks will still exist. However, we should accept that the cat is out of the bag, and the existence of these tools is a given reality, which cannot be stopped or banned. It's just too valuable and too useful, and people won't stop working on it. And it's an issue that requires considerable and quick reform in the way the academic world conducts quality assessment and proofing. We need new ways of assessing the quality of a document, not just through the existing plagiarizing tools, plagiarizing detection. Some tips about avoiding plagiarism. First of all, do not procrastinate and do not put off making your project. Otherwise, you will become panicked and careless about citation and proper summarization. You should familiarize yourself very well with the subject beforehand, so you're not stressed when working on it. You should also consult writing and plagiarism guidelines for your academic institutions where you're conducting and publishing. For example, if you're publishing a master's paper or a PhD at UPB, then you should consult their guidelines first. All sources must be credited and cited, and you should provide all necessary information if other readers want to find the original work. This applies to all sources of information. If you use a book, an article, a website, whether it's text, graphic, illustration, chart, table, anything. You should always include quotations if you're using verbatim snippets, and you should seek to use quotations only if the text naturally fits your own argument. You shouldn't use this as a shortcut to pad your own paper and finish it quickly but not add anything new. You should keep proper notes of sections that represent information from other sources and your source, so it's properly cited and referenced. You can also use the citation manager to keep track of those sources. Use good paraphrasing. First, familiarize yourself with the topic so you understand it better and have a better ability to distill information. Those sources still need to be cited, however. And when using assistance from ChatGPT and other large language models, always make sure to check the information and find out credible and verified sources for that information. Also, use a plagiarism checker yourself to check how well you respected the proper points above, and to get assistance perhaps in rewriting problematic sections and properly citing external sources if need be. A few conclusions at the end. Remember that avoiding plagiarism does not mean avoiding similarity to other texts. It just means using said sources in a meaningful, natural, and innovative way that serves your own ideas while also crediting and respecting the authors of all your sources. Similarity does not mean plagiarism. If it has a similarity of 15%, it may be 0% plagiarized if it uses all those sources effectively and correctly. Similarity and plagiarism detection tools are currently effective and sophisticated and cannot be easily fooled by humans using simple word rephrasing and playing around with the word order and using synonyms. So it's not that easy to fool. You can just you can use an AI rephraser though to get away with that, I guess. And we should be realistic about the mass adoption and use of AI generation tools that are able to bypass these tools. You should, if you consult ChatGPT, you always need to verify the information. Do not just copy paste. Do not abuse AI generation tools. It will lead to worse outcomes for everyone, yourself, and the academic institution as well. And remember that most cases of plagiarism can be avoided if you just provide proper citations and be careful about referencing all your sources. And that is everything about plagiarism in a nutshell, at least for practical purposes. And these are all my references, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.